So good afternoon, sisters and brothers. Wow, what a great turnout. Some nice friendly faces out there, and I want to thank you all for traveling great distances. Many of you even coming in last evening to be able to attend today. It's much appreciated. As Penny mentioned, we're live streaming with rabble.ca today, so welcome to the world who are at home or in their offices joining us for this very important session. I also want to give a big shout out to our PEL class in Port Elgin, who I understand is watching us there today too. So hi, sisters and brothers, solidarity. I'd also like to thank Rena Ouellette, our area director for the Atlantic, who's here. We had a great session in New Brunswick yesterday, over 120 trade unionists from all over the province there, and Reno did a great job with the New Brunswick staff putting that off. And to our Halifax staff, as Penny mentioned, including Yvette and Maureen, who've a lot of the work that you see here is because they're working very hard behind the scenes to put these kinds of events off. And of course, all of our servicing staff who joined us today, Chad, Susan, Linda, Carla, Tom, and Kim. And to Katie from our National Communications Department, thank you for coming. And a warm welcome to the newest member of the Atlantic staff, Shelley Burgoyne, who's joined us in communications. Stand up and say a big hi, Shelley. And of course, again, thanks to all of you for coming. And to our community speakers, Fred and David, thanks for joining us today and bringing your perspective. You're going to hear from them in a little bit. Penny mentioned that Fred Crooks has joined us. He's an executive VP for Bell Alliant, and he's with us today to talk a little bit about his perspective on what's happening with labor rights in the country. And I want to tell you a little bit about why we've invited an employer representative to this meeting, and we've done it in a couple of locations across the country. And it's very important that we're hearing from employers in this conversation. The right wing's attack on worker rights could very well end up having a destabilizing impact on labor relations and workplace relations in Canada. And our employers very much need to be engaged in this discussion. And we need them, those that are willing, to talk and to speak out. And we're still going to have our differences, and we're still going to hard bargain, there's no doubt about that. But we need to be able to do that in the context of a stable and balanced labor relations regime. And I really appreciate, Fred, that you've taken the time to come with us, to come and spend with us today. Before getting into the bulk of my remarks, I want to get a plug in for our Atlantic Council meeting, and I did this yesterday, Moncton 2. It's going to be the first ever Atlantic Council, April 3rd to 6th, here in Halifax at the Convention Centre. The call letter has gone out. You're going to be getting lots more information over the next little bit, so please pay attention to that and know that we're also going to be seeking, and you've received some emails on this, recommendations for our Executive Council committee, as well as 7 standing committees. So about 28 people that will have activists being part in elected positions, being part of our regional council, and that's going to be pretty exciting. So if you have recommendations for any of those committees or for our executive, make sure you get them to myself or Penny over the next few days. Our scheduled speakers at the Atlantic Council include Malin Mitchell, and he's the president of the Wisconsin Firefighters Union in the United States. And Wisconsin is one of more than 24 U.S. states where labor rights have really taken a brutal blow in the last decade or so. And it's ironic that Wisconsin was actually the first United state that granted collective bargaining rights to public sector workers. There was an article in the New York Times this weekend that basically detailed in gory details how damaging and destructive this right-wing attack has been on the labor movement in the U.S., where they have virtually legislated away the strength and effectiveness of American unions. So, for example, in Wisconsin, imagine that they have laws that prevent some unions from negotiating health plans, pensions, safety provisions for their workplace, sick leave, and vacations. Not much. They also have severe limits on the wages that public sector unions can bargain for. You can't bargain anything more than inflation. The hands of unions have virtually been tied. Their ability to bargain collectively eliminated. The question then becomes for many workers is why would they pay union dues? And because in a right-to-work state you don't have to, many do not. Governments in the US and some here in Canada need serious reminding that it is their role to ensure prosperity gets shared. And one of the ways that that happens in our society is with strong unions. Their job is not to perpetuate a race to the bottom economy on the citizens of Canada. And that if they try to do this, that there will be political consequences. There was another news commentary on Monday written by a progressive US economist, apparently there are some. The featured headline said, "America without unions." A stunning kind of headline to see. And the Economist wrote in this article, "Without a robust unionized sector, there is little hope now that the relentless spread of low-wage work, job insecurity, and economic inequality can be reversed in America." Sisters and brothers, these are very serious times, and this is not just a US problem. Bad ideas do not recognize borders. We have in Canada our own brand of right-wing politicians who want to import these very same anti-union practices into our workplaces, into our communities, and into our lives. Given what we're facing here at home, the story of Wisconsin will be a very important one for us to hear about and learn from. Also at our Atlantic Council, we're going to hear from Jessica McCormick, who's president of the Canadian Federation of Students. Woohoo. And yeah, she's an incredible young activist, and she happens to be from Cape Breton. And she's going to share with us what is really somewhat a dismal picture being painted now for the future of young people at work. The most educated generation in our history, and yet they face the very real possibility of not doing better than their parents, of being worse off, of having to work longer in precarious job after precarious job. This is why what we're doing here with this Rights at Work campaign is so very important, because this is not just about us in this room. It's about Jess and David and their generation and the next generation and the kind of jobs they're going to have, the kind of life they're going to have. And of course, you're going to hear from Jerry, our national president, who will be with us to mark another Unifor first in our first year. So why are we doing this leadership tour? Why the full court press on defending labor and union rights? Why has Unifor made defending labor rights and union rights and good jobs our most important campaign of the union? Just so you know, by the time Jerry and Peter have finished in St. John's tomorrow, they will have, in just 6 weeks, held 19 meetings with thousands of Unifor activists just like you from Vancouver to Newfoundland. Thousands of Unifor activists will have heard how very, very serious this moment is for our future and the future of our rights as workers and trade unionists, including the most basic right to belong to a union, Sisters and brothers, we are facing an unprecedented threat. Right-wing politicians desperately playing wedge politics have chosen unions as a convenient target. But I can say that in just the short 6 months that Unifor was created, I think we're already having a huge impact on their plans. This is now our moment in time. This is why we were created. This is the moment when we choose to stand up and defend our union, our hard-fought-for gains in our workplaces, the moment when we choose to push back, perhaps like we've never pushed back before. These politicians have emboldened their anti-union friends at, sorry Fred, employer organizations across the country. Include some, yes, some of them, and I'll name a couple of them. The CFIB and merit contractors. They're feeling extremely, extremely brave at the moment. And you should understand their contempt for us. Take Catherine Swift, chair of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. If anyone follows her on Twitter, you should know what her bio says. It states she loves fighting intrusive freedom thieves in governments and unions. When in fact, I'm not sure that she does much fighting of governments, unless they're progressive ones. We haven't got too many of those in Canada these days. And she doesn't really spend a lot of time fighting big corporations either, because a lot of the work that the CFIB does is about keeping wages down. And I think it's Walmart and McDonald's that ends up benefiting from that kind of lobbying. But she does spend a lot of time condemning unions and union members, all of you. Her only job, it appears, is to do that. So why? Why does she begrudge you a good wage and a good benefit in your workplace, a good pension plan? They attack us because we are actually making a difference. Because we do one thing that nobody else can do except the government through taxation. We force the wealth created in our economy to be shared. Unions do that. In fact, outside of taxation, we're the only people that do that. At some point, and I've said this many times, we have to decide that if the CFIB is going to be so anti-union, then why would our members spend 1 cent of their hard-earned wages or pensions in any of the businesses that they represent? Why would we do that? At the federal level, we have some issues going on, including the Prime Minister, our #1 issue. He's been pretty busy attacking unions in a whole host of ways. He's virtually declared war on collective bargaining with unprecedented interference. You probably remember the situation at Air Canada and Canada Post, where we had workers who were locked out by their employer and legislated back by the government. I mean, I just can't even get my head wrapped around how that can occur. And the Prime Minister's been pretty busy backing some of his own MPs with a couple of quite intrusive and anti-union private members' bills, 377 and 525. I'm not going to talk a lot about those because Jerry has some information to share with you about them. And in many ways, he's been helping to implement a low-wage agenda in Canada. And he's been doing this in a number of ways. A rapid expansion of the temporary foreign worker program, a higher retirement age, changes to employment insurance that force the unemployed to take very low-paid work, and this attack on collective bargaining. All of these things together contribute to wage suppression. At the provincial level, getting ready for Hudak. We've got some video we're going to show. I'm sure you've heard of a guy called Tim Hudak. He's been in the news a lot lately. Until last week, he was campaigning to be premier on the promise of turning Ontario into a right to work for less state, like those states in the United States have done. But because of our union and because of the work we've undertaken, including Jerry challenging him to a very public debate on the economy and unions, the Ontario Conservatives have backed away, for now, from right to work for less. Oh yes, I think at one point Jerry might have said he had no guts too. And here's what he had to say, Tim Hudak. Hope this works.
The right to work policy has been a lightning rod for the PCs, sparking controversy and fear. It allowed the opposition and Labour to demonize Tim Hudak as a job buster and a union killer. Right to work gives employees in union shops the ability to opt out of paying membership dues. This morning, Hudak abandoned the key plank in his platform.
So if we're elected, we're not going to do it. We won't touch the rand formula.
Yeah, I think, could folks hear it? Not great. Okay, he said he chickened out. But right, for now, because there is a big but in this public declaration of backing down from right to work. And that is they have a whole other bucket list of anti-worker items that they'd like to implement. So, you know, Hudak is no friend of ours. And this is no time for us to take the foot off the gas. We have to keep going and keep pushing. Once in, you know, if we were to get, this was to happen in our country, if we were to get right to work laws or legislations, in a very short time, what you would see is what we've seen in the US, which is an erosion of wages, very little collective bargaining happening, which means our collective agreements end up getting stripped over time. And we have an ineffective ability to even do things about health and safety, as Jordan's going to share in his presentation. So if there was ever a time for trade unionists to be serious about the challenges we face, it's now. Because if Hudak can roll back the clock in Ontario, as Harper is doing at the federal level, it will only be a matter of time before a government in Nova Scotia or New Brunswick or Newfoundland follows suit. We could very well be next. That's why we must make sure that these ideas don't cross provincial boundaries, don't take root in Atlantic Canada, because that's not who we are in Atlantic Canada. You know, we have to consider, we still have our own issues here. We just elected a new government in Nova Scotia, and one of the first things they did was roll back improvements to labor law that we gained under the previous government. So the world is not that rosy here either. Sisters and brothers, Unifor was created as an act of hope and solidarity. But it was also created as a force to be reckoned with and as a bold response to the attack workers are under at both the collective and political bargaining tables. It was created to make a difference, and I believe we've been making one in 180 days. You're going to be hearing some pretty great information from Jordan, our economist, about the value of unions to everyone, not just those who belong to a union. This information will be very important as we defend worker and union rights. Because if we don't do that, who will? Who will defend our collective agreements if we don't? Who will defend labor legislation if we don't? These leadership meetings are about making sure that all of you, all of our activists, know exactly what's at stake. But our work can't stop here. We have to bring this conversation, this message, back into our workplaces. We are going to be talking with every single Unifor member from coast to coast to coast, 300,000 of them. And we have to do this so that our provinces do not become a Wisconsin or a South Carolina of the North. Last week, the governor of South Carolina, also a right-to-work state, said publicly, "We discourage any company that has unions from wanting to come to South Carolina because we don't want them to taint our water." South Carolina, by the way, is, with its virtually non-existent union coverage, has one of the highest poverty rates in the United States. Because unions have a lot to do with lifting people out of poverty. And when you don't have them, and when they can't be effective, then that's what happens in your society. So we need to make sure that our own politicians understand what's at stake here. They have to understand that there are political consequences to going down this road. Last weekend, Justin Trudeau, the leader of the Liberal Party, they had their policy convention. Maybe some of you watched it on the news. He gave two pretty decent speeches talking about the middle class. Not once in those speeches did he mention unions, labor, or collective bargaining. I wonder where he thinks the middle class came from. Because unions and collective bargaining created the middle class. And you know, I've been reading a lot about this new pope that we have, and apparently he agrees with us. He said recently, "Trade unions have been an essential force for social progress, without which a semblance of a decent and humane society is impossible under capitalism." Pope Francis. And even some old-time conservatives agree with us. My Canada is one where trade unions and free collective bargaining make Canada a better place to live. Senator Hugh Segal. Cheap wages, precarious work, less equality for women, weakened unions, weakened and eroded social programs, less democracy. Fend for yourself, Canada. This is Mr. Harper's vision of our country. It's Tim Hudak's vision of our country. It's the vision of any politician devoid of ideas about how we build a strong economy and lift everyone up. But it's not our vision. And I have a message that if we're going to survive this assault on trade union rights, on workplace rights, on our very essential democratic rights in Canada, we have to do it bigger than what we're doing in this room. And we can't just talk to each other. We have to talk to our neighbors. We have to build social unionism in our communities. And we have to be open to new ways of organizing, like our community chapter model. We have to take this idea of coalition and community building to a whole new level, take social unionism to a whole new level. Because as workers, we're not just wage earners, we're also citizens. We are parents and grandparents. We care about the environment, and we care that some of our neighbors live in poverty. We care about our communities. And we know that our wages are very, very important to ensuring prosperity in those communities. And there is no shame, sisters and brothers, no shame in making a good wage. There is no shame in equal pay. There is no shame in working a lifetime for a pension. These things should not require defending. They should be a matter of pride, something we expect and wish for all Canadians. Imagine for 1 second if unions did not view their members as citizens, if unions did not participate in politics or political bargaining, what kind of country we would have. What what would our health and safety laws look like? Would we have workers' compensation, unemployment insurance, public pensions, universal health care, minimum wages, maternity leave, same-sex benefits? Would any of that social fabric had been woven without unions? Would the things that we fought for collectively that now really define us as Canadians, would they exist if it were not for the progressive force of unions? I suggest that they would not, because we built that. And we're going to have to spend a lot of time and a lot of energy over the next year or two defending it. In the days and months ahead, we will need you to step up your activism just a little bit more, because making a difference is what you do best, and we need you to keep doing it. Solidarity. Thanks so much.